So I went back to the setup from our last video and I finished it up. Looks a lot better now. I evened out the centrals, played around with the size of this lateral. It's still a little wider than this one, but that's just how it's going to be. And I played around a little bit with the contours. So you can see things look a lot better. This is the part that we added after we did those extractions. You can see I filled in just a little bit in between the teeth. But yeah, so we're calling that our simple setup, even though it didn't end up being super simple because of the occlusion. This one ended up being kind of simple, but the other ones weren't so much. All right, so I'm going to hide these, okay? And we're gonna go and turn these ones on. So this is what we're gonna do in this video, is we're gonna take on a little bit harder of a case. This is a patient. I actually have a few slides to share. This is a patient of mine that it's been a while now since I saw her. She presented to me with ameliogenesis imperfecta, but as an adult. She's probably in her 60s, and you can see at rest she's not showing any of her teeth, where normally somebody might show at least a couple millimeters, a female at least. And when she smiles really big, you can see that she doesn't show much. So we know that we can get some more length out of these. The interesting thing about ameliogenesis imperfecta is that it tends to result in an open bite, which you can see she's got quite an open bite. So her posterior teeth are touching, the anterior teeth are far from touching. So the concern when I was meeting with her initially is, how's that going to look if we lengthen the teeth enough to close that open bite? We know that we can get more length, but is it going to look wrong if we add this much length? And so this is where digital dentistry really shines, especially when you're doing your setup with Mesh Mixer, which was no investment on your part, and you have an inexpensive 3D printer where you can print out your wax up. And the concept here that I want to hit home with you is that with these cases, you do your setup and you leave any teeth that they might have while you do your setup, and then you print the setup on top of the teeth that they have. That way you can make a mold on that model out of like a putty, PVS putty, and then take that to the mouth, block out obviously any undercuts, any embrasure spaces with either like a rope wax or even Vaseline, and then fill that little PVS putty matrix with a bisacryl or whatever you like to use for your provisionals, and place that in the mouth. We use a bisacryl. I put it in the mouth. I wait a full 3 minutes, and then I take the putty out. And what's left in the mouth is something that the patient can see, a transfer of our digital wax up to the mouth so the patient can see what that's going to look like. And so I can see what that's going to look like. So this is how she presented, and you can see that she has quite a bit of damage to the enamel. And so we brought her into Mesh Mixer, same as we're going to do, and we did this wax up. And this is the wax up that I want to do with you. And when this was tried in the mouth, this is what that looks like. So you can see that I don't do a whole lot of cleanup, since this is just, like, this appointment is just for this. Patient comes in, Vaseline undercuts, anything gets blocked out, and then take my putty matrix, put the bisacryl into the mouth, wait for it to set, pull it out. Normally there's material down here covering the gingiva. I'll just kind of flick that off. Normally it gets very thin down in here. It comes off fairly easy. And then that's it. I don't clean much more of it off, and then I hand the patient a mirror. Well, normally I look first, and if the patient looks like excessively too much, I'll adjust it. I'll get it to where I think it looks good. Unless it's borderline, then I'll hand it in the mirror. But if it's pretty obvious that I went too far, I'll adjust it in the mouth. But at the end, hand them the mirror and say, what do you think? So this is how she looked with the new length to her teeth. Does it look like the teeth are maybe a little bit, like showing a little bit too much? Perhaps. But under her circumstances, I think, I know that we were quite happy, and so was she. So what we did is we kept those putty matrices and scheduled her to come back. When she came back, we prepped these teeth, the anterior 6, top and bottom. Or actually, no, I think we went back to on the mandibular arch, we went back to the first premolars, and we used those same exact matrices as our template to make our temps. So we make our temps, and if the patient's happy with that still, now we know that we can take our digital plan that we made and send it directly to the lab and say, copy this exactly. If they didn't like it though, you can adjust it chair side and then scan that again, okay? And then send that to the lab and say, copy this exactly. So this is the provisionals, okay? And she wore these while the lab was sent all the information. So then I asked the lab for them to send me some screenshots of the work that they were doing. You can see that they were using 3Shape. And this is what we sent to them and said, please follow this. And then that's the crowns that they made from it. And then we had her back, we did our insert, and this is how things looked, and that was the end result. Like I said, she was happy, we were happy. She does look, like I kind of wish that the incisal edge was just closed a little bit, but closing her vertical would have been a much larger challenge, and it wasn't necessary. She had already tried this in as provisionals, and she was very happy. So I just wanted to show you that, but we'll hop right back over into our setup. One thing I want to impress on you is that if you can set your model to the grid, meaning that the grid is showing where the occlusal plane and the incisal edge position is going to be, or the incisal plane, that's going to help quite a bit with setting teeth, because now I have a reference. Technically, I could add a reference. I could bring in a plane. Let me show you what I mean. Like this right here, I can pull this plane in. I can manipulate that and put it where I want, and then use that as a reference. But normally, I just use the grid as a reference. And because I have the grid and the teeth as a reference, I can go ahead and for now just hide this one. That was a Control V shortcut. And I can come into here, and I'm going to go under we'll go under these ones. All right, so for the maxillary teeth, we have a few options. And I don't remember what I used when I first did this case, but I'm going to go with these ones. I'm just going to try these ones out, okay? And so remember how last time we had a problem where they came in extra big? Still, I don't know why that happens sometimes, but let's go ahead and try this out again. Click on that, mesh mix, and round. It's just kind of a weird thing that happens sometimes. So one thing, so these teeth over here, I set those before I made them into a library. I set them just generically to unarch, okay? So don't expect that it's always going to fit, because it won't. The idea is that they're all connected together, which allows me to at least kind of start getting them where I want. I'm going to focus first on these anterior teeth, and you'll notice that often I'll click up in here, okay, to re-center it so I can see how I'm doing with this curve right here. And so I'm looking at those canine tips, how they relate to the plane. And then I can come and look over here. I'm looking at this midline and realizing that could be improved. So that's probably a pretty good starting point, okay? Maybe I might change this just a little bit. Now what I'm doing, I'm looking at this line right here and how it relates to my canines, but I'm also looking right here and notice that there's a diastema between number 11 and 12. We'll call it 12, it might be 13. And so technically, if I'm looking at that plane, which maybe I should, I'm going to hit accept. I'm going to, for a second, I'm going to turn this off and look at this. Because on here, you can see the mesial of this lateral and this lateral is right on that line. So these teeth are pretty well following that grid. So we'll go ahead and go back to these and make sure that they do a similar thing. But once you get it close, then you can go ahead and hit accept. And when you want to start moving teeth individually, probably the easiest thing to do is to choose this option to just separate them into their individual components. Okay, so now we can move each of them individually. And I'm going to go back for 1 second because I want to scale these a little bit. I'm realizing now that I like where the position is of my anterior teeth, but the posteriors don't go back far enough. And so we're going to just increase everything by just a little bit. Let me pull that back just a little. And once we tuck that in and tuck that in, that might be enough. And so let's hit accept and then back to the separate shells button. Give it a second to think. And now I'm going to go and I didn't mean to do that. Escape. I'm going to click on one tooth and transform just the one tooth. So we're going to turn it a little and pull it in. And then I'm going to hit A and then click on this one and T. And I'm going to do a similar thing where I pull that in like so. A, click on this one, T. I'm just following the way the tooth is. A, click on this, and T. And so then the question you'd have to decide is, do I leave the diastema? And we're going to, for now, decide to leave it. Okay, so right now, let's hit accept. Right now we're looking at these teeth, and honestly, I'm going to combine them. Hit Control A, Control Shift G, and then separate them. Oh wait, I think if you no, they don't. Okay, so that way they all have the face groups turned off. So now as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it going, okay, am I happy? Do I like this? This, I don't know. There's something about the laterals I'm not loving. I don't know. Maybe it's not too bad. Might just be that that this mold has a sharp line angle right there. You know what I might do is hold down Shift, click on that one, and just increase the size of these just a little bit. And then one at a time. Change that angle just a little bit. Maybe make this one a little bigger. Maybe a little bigger there too. See, if I look at this half, that doesn't look bad, but notice I made that much bigger than this one, and I was hoping it wouldn't be noticeable, but I kind of think it is. So I might scale that back a little bit. Hold on. So this one here, looks like height-wise is almost 12. And this one, if I wanted it to be similar, somewhere down in here, that's probably pretty close. On that. Alrighty, and then maybe we'll pull it out just a little bit. Alrighty, we're gonna go with this, but I'm gonna just take the point off of these canines. I think that might be part of what's bothering me. Did I say canines? I meant laterals if I did. So see how these are just a little beyond the plane? I like to create a step. Shortcut for sculpting tool is 2. So right here when I'm done, if I want to switch to another tooth, hold on, no, let's keep going. My strength is up, but I think that the reason that this is going slow is that my triangles are pretty dense. Alrighty, so I hit escape, and then I clicked on the tooth I wanted, then I hit 2, and then I'm ready to sculpt again. But I'm going to go ahead, hit escape, and let's look at these. So I'm pretty happy with this as is. Technically, I think I could raise these ones up just a little bit. So I held down Shift, selected each of them, and then hit T on the keyboard for transform. Snuck that up just a little bit and called it good. All right, so there's my maxillary wax up. So if you look at these right here, where the patient's teeth are coming through, what I do is I leave that alone. Okay, and the reason I leave it alone is because I want to be able to put this in the patient's mouth to test it out. And it's not going to go in the patient's mouth if I remove these teeth, because the teeth are in the patient's mouth. And I'm also looking at that canine and thinking, you know, maybe it's sticking out too far. And I could pull it in just a little bit. All right, we'll call that good. If you feel like it would require you to print a new model, but if you feel like it, what you can do is, after you've approved the design with the patient, if you don't want these teeth sticking out in your provisionals, then you can go in and smooth them back. So what you would do is come in like this, and normally I would just go into my sculpting tools, and notice I have the model selected, go into the sculpting tools, and either go in with something like this, make it a little bigger, and just really hit that hard, okay? And see how I'm bringing this and I'm pulling it in. Or if you need something more aggressive, if you remember the draw tool, if you hold down Control, it pushes things inward. And normally what I'm doing is a combination of those two things, okay? Is I'll smooth areas and I'll draw inward some areas. You don't want to really do much to the teeth on the sides though, because that will affect how well your matrix seats. And I would go through and do that on all the teeth, and then when I save that out as a file, then I'm good to go. to save these out as a file. You can leave these coming out the bottom, but to save them out as a file, you would just select all of these like this, and then right over here it says combine, or the keyboard shortcut is Y, and then they're combined. You don't have to do any kind of Boolean union for 3D printing. 3D printing, you send this to the printer as is, and it will be able to handle that, okay? So if you remember on this case, though, there was more to it than just the maxillary teeth. We also had these ones down in here. And so I'm going to go into Mesh Mix, okay? And let's go into the Pontic one and scroll all the way to the bottom. Notice we have a full set of mandibular teeth right here. I'm going to drop it off into the space here. And if you remember from the PowerPoint presentation, there is, excuse me, there is the wax that goes from the first premolar to the first premolar. So if I do like this and then hit E, which is expanded connected, I've got all those ones selected and I can delete them. I just clicked delete. So now I've got first premolar to first premolar. And for now, what I'm going to do is take this one, Control V, or you could click the little eyeball here. And now I got this to look at, and I can hit and move all these together over to where I want them to be, okay? And so I'm looking at a variety of things. Things like align my midline first, see where I'm at, I need to come inward. Things are pretty well falling in line, but notice it's kind of dipping down. And so I can take this and turn it just a little bit and raise it up. I have gone maybe a little too far, bring it back. You can see that that is pretty dang close, close enough that we're going to hit accept. I'm going to hit Control A, Control Shift G, because I don't need those fancy colors. And then I'm going to go under Edit, and I'm going to separate these shells. The reason I combine these other ones on the maxillary arch is just for now it's easier to keep track of things when I don't have so many. I'm also going to take my object browser and lengthen it out a little bit just because, you know, things are getting full. All right, so first what I would do is look here from this direction. I have my pinky over my A and my index finger over the T, and I basically hit T and move things until I'm happy with them. So I'm stretching these teeth out a little bit because her teeth are going to be long and skinny when I'm happy with it. We know, because this is our reference, we know that her maxillary teeth come about to that line. So if I sneak them just a little above the line, I can get a little bit of vertical overlap. And then I hit A, click here, and T, and start off making sure I'm happy with the mesiodistal position of the tooth. Stretch that one out as well. Maybe a little bit more. Try to match the tooth next to it. So not too bad right there. Then I'm going to come over here. Do a similar thing. That's fine for now. Notice this is getting down in the bottom corner, so I'll hit C to center it. And then pull things here, this way and that, until I'm happy with that position. This one I might try to tilt it back just a little bit. I'm going to hit A and then T again, because if you notice, this square had disappeared. I'm going to pull that so I can pull this down, but I am also going to hit A, but then 2, and then increase the size of this, and switch it to smooth. Because this one, that custom got a little too pointy when I stretched it out, so I'm going to do that. So A, or an escape. And now I'm going to come over here, T, pull that up. Hit C to center it. A, click, oh, I didn't hit A, I hit S. And then T here. Honestly, it's not looking too bad, but we got to look at our opposing. Okay, so let's turn that back on, and we got to make some decisions on how we want to handle this. So this is not even touching the opposing, so we know for sure that we want to, I'm going to lengthen it a little bit and then maybe tilt it in just a little bit and then pull it this way to kind of try to nestle it up into that space right there. From the last video, you know how to, if you want, you can always change this to be able to change it along the planes that are more favorable, like a mesial, distal, and a buccolingual plane. The other thing you could do is pull this one down, but I'm specifically looking at that back tooth and wanting some occlusion there. And so that is looking pretty dang close. I'm going to hit accept. I'm going to move forward. Oops, I'm going to hit accept. I'm going to click on this, then hit T, because I think that we could tuck it in just a little bit and then raise it up a little bit just to capture a little bit of occlusion there, a little bit more overlap. I'm going to hit A. I'm going to hop over to the other side because it's nicer to focus first on these teeth back in here. And obviously by doing this, you start to kind of see where your limitations lie. You know, like if I want that to touch, do I need to raise it up all the way? No, I can try some other things. For example, I can double click on it, select the whole thing, deselect anywhere, and I can come in with the warping tool and I can double click with my left mouse to lock that part and put some throughout the tooth like so. These are mostly to try to constrain what's going to happen when I try to do this one, but no, well, hold on, let me throw some in on this side. Okay, so I put those to kind of try to hold that, and then I can click and drag this and pull that up closer into some kind of occlusion without having to pull the tooth so high up. So I'm going to hit accept. And so that does a pretty good job of adjusting the tooth while trying to maintain the anatomy, the contours. So I'm going to hit escape to get completely out of there, and then T again. And so kind of pull this up, pull up. All right, so that's kind of touching right there. Things are touching pretty good, but if you notice, these are not even close to touching because, and that, you know, they may not. You don't always, you know, have a perfect occlusion, especially when somebody presents with such an open bite. But what I want to do is click on this one, Control V to hide it. And now what I'm doing is I'm looking at what I've got here, and I'm going to actually align it to my plane. But these are all my teeth, and I had pulled these ones up into occlusion. I may back off on this one. That one got a little too high. I might try a different way of getting that. But so these all came up, but these other ones did not. So I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to pull all of these up just a little bit so that they're a little more in line with everything here. A, click on this one, T. I'm going to pull it down even further. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this one back on. Okay, and I'm going to just do like this so I can kind of see where I'm at. Notice there is a midline discrepancy that the patient has. Don't worry about it. That is what it is. Doesn't have to be the same on both, but you can see that there are some occlusal discrepancies throughout here that we could try to go after some of these and see. That's really the value in doing these setups, is because you learn so much about what's going on in this patient's mouth, and you begin to learn what your limitations are. I'm going to click the S. Since these are all connected, the only way to transform just the one is like that. I'm going to pull that out just a little bit. And then hit Escape, back down to these. So this one's touching here, but not in the front. This one, we're kind of getting contacts on both sides, but we also know that our midlines are off, and that does sometimes lead to small discrepancies like that. What I'm curious about, so I clicked on here, I typed E to expand to connect, and then T for transform, and that allows me to bring that in just a little bit. I'm going to click here to see. I can work with that, and that's just a little closer down in there. Escape. I'm going to double click on this, hold down Shift, come over to Form and do Warp. Because essentially I want to leave the cusp tip where it is, but I want to pull, change my point of rotation by typing C. I want to pull this a little higher up into there. And let me see, I just left the one there. That's not too bad. So let me just pull that out towards this tooth. Alrighty, not bad at all. Let's hit accept. Let's click on this. And alright. Not too bad. Not too bad. Like I said, I leave these spots that are poking through. Sometimes, okay, here's a good thing. Let's say that we're happy with this, but we know that this gingival margin's way down here. And so if we leave it alone and we don't do anything, our matrix for our final crowns isn't, you don't, in the diagnostic step, you could stop here just because you're really trying to decide if this idea of lengthening the teeth is going to work. But once you get to a point where you are planning to use, let me go into sculpt, draw, where you're planning to use this for a, here I'm going to try to kick the strength up, for a matrix to make your provisionals, then you do want to at least cover your gingival margins. Okay, when we were working in the maxillary arch, that was pretty well covered, so we didn't have to do anything different. But like right here where it's sticking out, that I can sculpt that in, okay? But this other, these areas down in here, these ones, you're going to want to pull them down to at least cover the gingival margin. So right now what I'm doing, here let me hold down shift so I turn on the smooth. Okay, then I hit escape to get out of the tool, click on the next tooth, hit 2 to get back into the tool, shift to use my secondary brush of smoothing, escape, click, 2. So you can see I'm just pulling it down until it's into that gingival margin space. But obviously it's bulking it out, and that's why I then switch it over to shift, or I hold down shift to switch it to my robust secondary brush, and I pull that in, and then escape, click here 2, and just keep doing the same thing until you go all the way across. What this is going to do is allow you to use this as a matrix that covers everything. Obviously, you'd have to do this both out here on the facial, but also on the lingual. And I don't need to keep doing that for you. But you can see the difference between these, where these go all the way to the gingival margin and these ones do not. So, again, when you are ready, you would take these and combine them. And then all of these you would send off to, I'm going to just come throughout here, hit G, technically E would have also worked, and then Control Shift G just to get the colors off of these. Also, because they're all a face group, you can also just double click on them like this. And then I do want to show you one last thing before we end the video. All right, Control Shift G. Last thing I want to show you, and I should have done this first, is we want to make sure that these new teeth we added aren't in heavy occlusion against these lower teeth. And a way of doing that, so right now you could just print those off and call it your try-in, but if you needed to dive into occlusion a little bit, what I do is I would select these and separate them from this model first. Okay, so that's Y to separate. And then what I would do is come in under here, under my make solid, because I know that if I switch my make solid to accurate, it turns on this offset distance, and I would probably, for something like this, leave these alone, leave that at 128, 128, but on my distance here, and this is the same distance I use when I'm doing this in exocad, is I choose this and it makes, and I hit update, and it makes a shell that is exactly 0.2 millimeters or 0.02 millimeters larger. And then I hit accept, and now I can come in to these ones. And if you want to do it against the opposing, that also works. I'm not interested in that. I just want to adjust it against the new ones. Okay. And last video we talked about occlusion a little bit. I'm going to separate these, and then after they separate, I can click on these and click down on these and do a Boolean difference. And you can see it's going to be sluggish. Here, let me just hit accept, and I'll show you the areas where it was heavy in occlusion. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to turn my grid off. And I'm going to come back in here. So really there was only a couple spots. Sometimes there's going to be a lot more. But there's just those couple spots that were heavy in occlusion. But if you look, if I turn back on the, where is it? It was the, should be this one. If you look back in here, we have now created right there, well, I don't know if you can actually see it, but we've created a 0.02 millimeter gap, which works fairly well to make sure that as you take that clinically, everything's gonna look great. All right, and so here we go. So that is our final result from our middle of the road wax up. Okay, so what I want to do with you in the next video is I want to do a full wax up so you can, one, see how you can take a full set of teeth and position them and move them around. But I also want to talk just a little bit about changing one's vertical. And so, yeah, so start playing around with this. Make sure that, I'll make sure that like this case right here is already on the files down below this video. And you would have downloaded it if you downloaded the other stuff. We've been working on this one for a while, but on the next video I'm going to add another patient's files, and I'll talk more about them in the next video. But please try to be following along with these so that you can play around with it yourself. And the next step is take one of your own patients and bring them in and start trying to do a wax up. And let me know if you have any problems.